He's from Stanbic IBTC. He's our special guest. He's the head of Sub-Saharan Africa Equity Sales for Stanbic IBTC. Send a message through WhatsApp to 0809-444-0981. You can also send a message or leave a comment on the YouTube platform. Just type in the search box, Smooth FM Lagos, subscribe to the channel and watch. Rotus?
Dele, good morning. You're welcome. Thanks for joining us, man.
Morning, gentlemen.
Great stuff. So, Mark, excellent stuff. Market review. I want to ask you about, we'll start with the equities market. There's been some buying interest or so in Airtel. What's behind that? Can you tell us? You know what's happening there?
I think the interest is really in stocks that are fungible. When I mean fungible, that are stocks that are traded both on the London Stock Exchange and Nigerian Stock Exchange. So the two stocks in focus will be Seplat and Airtel. And you know, in recent times we've seen that. Obviously, we've seen a clawback in the price of Airtel. Equally, some clawback in the price of Seplat, which, you know, some investors found interesting relative to where it's trading in the London leg. So we've seen demand in those two names. Ultimately, I think the idea is for people to buy the stock here, move it all the way to London, and potentially sell it in London to exit the market. I think, you know, for me, it's I mean, you know, people are looking for interesting ways to, you know, to play the market. Ultimately, what you worry about is the free float that remains on the Nigerian Stock Exchange, because when you move those shares to London, right, there's a likelihood that those shares will not come back to Nigeria, or they may come back, they may or may not come back. But what you find is that the liquidity starts thinning out in Nigeria. So for instance, now when Airtel got listed, there was probably about 16 billion naira worth of shares that was created in Nigeria. If somebody decides to buy all 16 billion and moves it to London, you realize that you won't find liquidity here. So that probably explains the rally, and we may continue to see that trend if the price stays at kind of level it's at, or it doesn't get too expensive.
Very interesting. I read about something like that happening with Old Mutual in I think it was in Zimbabwe, where it's trading in Zimbabwe and also in South Africa. Very interesting. But is the telco space, is it one of the hottest subsectors in Nigeria? What do you think?
I think for me, there are two really hot sectors this year. And I've, you know, just when I talk to clients, you know, I think this year the two hot sectors for me would be telcos or cement. I'm not really sure which I prefer. But if you look at the half-year results, you see that there's phenomenal growth coming through for both players, from both sectors. Easily, you saw one of the players in the cement sector growing at 44%. You're seeing the telcos who are showing sustainable growth, right? North of 20%, 30% in some cases. So that speaks to the times that we are in, where people are working from home. There's just so much, people are doing so much on their phones. There's so much interaction and, you know, time you're spending doing stuff. You know, so yeah, so I think those two stocks will be my top picks. I think maybe from a results perspective, it would be either cement or telcos, followed by consumer story, because you're actually seeing some resilience in the consumer story as well, given that people have adjusted prices in line with inflation. And then there's just for some reason there is demand, because that demand is growing. But I think potentially the fourth sector for me will be banks. I think banks will potentially either should perform, give us a flat performance or even slightly negative. But I think a lot of that is probably linked to the fact that there's an aggressive CRR regime at the moment, and there's just not enough liquidity to drive earnings.
I just want to follow up on your point on consumers. Isn't disposable income for the average Nigerian, isn't that a headwind for the consumer space? Or what do you think?
It is, and I'm saying depending on how you're playing the consumer space, right? No matter how tough the economy is, we have to eat. You know, I think, you know, so there's always a preference for sort of food players versus all other things. So the question I always ask myself is, you know, would people want to eat 3 square meals a day? The answer is yes. Would people want to wash their teeth 2 times a day, or would they want to shower 3 times a day? The answer is, you know, unlikely. So, you know, you have to just know how to play those sectors And they've been quite resilient. And you have to understand that there's also the fact that people can't get FX. So even the goods, the cheaper substitutes are probably not making their way into the market. So people are going to be forced to look for locally produced goods. They look for a creative way around how to play what's available in the market. But yeah, there's been decent resilience that we've seen from a price perspective and a volume perspective in the consumer food space.
Maslow's hierarchy of needs, as they say. Well done. How do you see things playing out between banks, fintechs, and telcos for market share in that digital area?
I was having this thought yesterday, and I thought, I saw this news out of Kenya where I saw Safaricom leading the charge, in collaboration with the banks, on how to allow them to use the Safaricom platform M-Pesa to allow Kenyans to be able to trade stocks, buy stocks on the stock market, through their phones and all of that. Something that has been embraced by both the banks and the telcos. I thought to myself, it's either you collaborate or you die. I find that in Nigeria, which is a very different case from what was happening in Kenya, we've shied away from having a telco-led market, and I think maybe to some extent, depending on what side you sit, people have a valid case to make. But the truth is, when I look at the penetration of the market, right? Telcos today have not over 100 million customers. Banks, even with duplication, maybe have 40 or 50 million customers. I don't think that banks have what it takes to drive the innovation and also drive the kind of financial inclusion that we need. And we need to start having a serious conversation around how can these two entities, remove that sort of ego or chip around the shoulder and see how can we work together, right? Because there's just so much data within that telco space that spending trends, spending patterns. There's so much stuff that exists. And also I always say I think even for banks that are even pursuing fintech approach, is that will would you have that Gen Z who's willing to wear a t-shirt to work, and work within that formal banking space, or will the management of the bank be happy to see a youngster be able to drive your fintech strategy, without having to put the whole burden of how the banks are run on these people, So and there's also so it's going to be a very difficult conversation. But we'll see how it plays out for Nigeria. But I think Kenya is definitely doing significantly better in terms of execution. Yeah.
You said data is expensive. Data is money. I was going to say, if they are going to collaborate, to encourage collaboration, each party will want to know what they'll gain from this, So who do you think would earn more or who would gain more in monetary terms?
I don't think it should be about that. I think it's about building a very massive ecosystem. I think the truth is the market is big enough. We can all win. And as long as we're able to get around the table and agree on how we both can win, it has to be mutually beneficial, right? And I think that's the spirit, as opposed to who makes more money and who doesn't make more money.
Yeah.
Because the truth is that change is coming, and it's either you get on board or you get pushed out of the way. And I know power is transient, right? Things cannot always be like this.
Yes,
exactly. I want to ask you about FX matters. How do you think FX security is going to turn out with Nigeria, I think in a week or two, getting this $3 billion from the IMF special drawing rights, and then hopefully Eurobond proceeds? How do you see that playing out?
Till 23rd of August, we should get to that credit alert. Thank God. So that bodes well initially for the reserves. I think where we'll get a bit more comfortable is when we obviously do the Eurobond, maybe an additional 5 to 6 billion. I think that would be a great place to, first of all, clear the queue. Investors have been on the queue for almost 2 years now. It'll be an opportunity to just, if they wanted to get out of the market, just really get out. But yeah, I'm hoping that there's light down the tunnel for at least for those investors that have been stuck on the queue. So yeah, liquidity should improve.
So we're still at 500 naira the dollar levels right now. Do you see that maintaining that level short to long term?
Given that we're looking for another, if assuming we raise 9 billion, I think it's very likely that I think one of the things we believe is that even given the CBN rule on BDC is that there will be an initial spike and then there's a clawback. Surprisingly, the black market hasn't been as crazily aggressive as I expected it to be. So I know that, cash dollars have probably dried up, but, on the inflow side, even that looking for inflow, it's still kind of at about 520, which is not a big deviation from where we've seen it. So it's going to be interesting to see whether there's actually what I'm looking at is if I see a reversal, and see that the price can go below 500. That's, we'll see how the market reacts.
That'll be a great day for me.
It would mean that central bank would have the firepower that it needs to meet legitimate FX demand. So
that's true. Yeah, great stuff. I want to move to T-bills, money market. We had an auction yesterday. I noticed the 364 days now at I think 7.3%. What do you make of this decline that we've seen in stop rates for at least on the longer end for money market?
I think it's maybe a signaling. Again, I said we're getting that initial credit alert on the 23rd. Obviously, we're looking to raise, so it's probably a signaling to say, what, we don't want to borrow at that level anymore. And so it would mean that maybe the government is going to slow down on this local borrowing and looking for ways to drive down cost of borrowing. So it's something that we've expected. The question was, is there enough liquidity, or is the liquidity level so high that that local investors start getting worried? Because when you speak to some of the pension funds, they do tell you that they feel like they are already at that limit in terms of borrowing to the government. So, and again, if you look at this year, the government is borrowing almost 2 trillion naira. That was 1 trillion, which is done in previous years. So, so there's a shift in the borrowing, a massive shift in the government's borrowing plan. But I think it's just a signal of where they want to take those interest rates.
Great stuff. I think only about a minute or so to go. Dele, quickly on a macroeconomic level, I haven't heard anything on the ongoing PMS deregulation talks between Labour and the federal government. Have you heard anything? What's the signaling there?
I mean, this is one prayer. This is one. I think what. Well, even when you go to the US now, people are complaining about high cost of petrol. If you go to Ghana, I don't know if you're following Ghana, there's also been having like this sort of end-SARS sort of protest as well. So this there's been having protests all of last week, and this protest had been postponed for so many months, and this has really been around fuel prices as well. So I think that obviously we know what to do. We need to deregulate the industry. I don't know if the willpower is there, but obviously if the PIB gets passed, I think one of the few things that the Minister of Petroleum has said is that subsidy has to go. I honestly, it's a very sensitive conversation, but honestly, we're spending right now. We spent about $170 billion naira so far on subsidy this year. We need to do something about it.
Fantastic stuff. Dele, it's always great having you to discuss these matters. Always.
Always a pleasure.
Time is too short.
Yeah, he doesn't look like he went through COVID. This looks like he dropped from Mars after space. Nice one. Thank you so much. If you missed any part of the conversation, everyone, please always subscribe to YouTube. Just go to YouTube and type Smooth FM Lagos and watch Rotus.